G'day and welcome to the Genre Fiction Podcast. I'm Jack Roney.
And I'm Harry Colfer.
And this week's
And I'm
special
Jo
guest.
Skinner.
Hey, Joe, you're supposed to wait for Jack to
I'm
introduce
sorry.
you. Come on.
I'm jumping the gun. That's typical of me.
Go,
I'm
carry on,
running,
Jack.
you see. I don't
Carry
want
on,
to miss it.
Jack.
I don't want to get too much time on.
Glad to see you keen, Joe. So this week's special guest is, as we know, is Dr. Jo Skinner, who's a Brisbane-based GP who writes contemporary women's fiction as well as freelance non-fiction articles about women's issues and mental health. She also has a long-distance running habit. When she's not working or writing, you'll find her accruing kilometres while plotting her next story. So welcome, Jo. Great to have you on our show.
Thank you for having me. It's a pleasure to be here.
Now's your chance to talk.
So first question right off the bat, given your professional career as a medical practitioner and all, I can only imagine all the tertiary studies that go with that and what that must involve, how did you come to do creative writing in amongst all the other studies and other commitments that you've got going on? Where did the creative writing start?
I actually started off formally quite late. But interestingly, when I was a kid, the things I was good at was writing and reading and those. So then primary school, if somebody said, "What do you want to be?" I remember thinking, "Oh, I want to be a writer." And I remember in primary school I grew up in Canberra and went to the oldest school that's still actually running. I think St John's was a bit older, but I went to Ainsley, which is still operational. And they had this plinth in the hallway, and that plinth had an Anzac on top, and some of the kids who went to school actually were Anzacs. And I remember I would have been late primary school, we got this little message saying that one of the Anzac soldiers said there's a time capsule under that plinth. So the whole school assembly we sat around this plinth and they unscrewed it, and there was a time capsule full of these fascinating things, like a bit of a flag that the Anzacs actually put up at Gallipoli and things. And then the school decided to put a new time capsule in, and they ran a story competition. And so whoever won that competition would get that story, would go into the little yearbook that was going to be in that plinth. And I really, 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 I don't think I'd ever wanted anything so much, really wanted to win it. And I did. And it was a terrible story. So the others must have been really bad. And I think then I sort of had that sense of, oh, I've written something and that'll be there in this time capsule when I'm not here anymore. And the sense of that was really exciting. And then in high school, I became really unwell. I had rheumatic fever, and then I developed one of the rare complications, a syndrome's chorea, and I spent about a semester of my high school years in hospital. And I remember being spoken over like I wasn't there and things, and I thought, oh, I'm sure I could do better than this. I couldn't do worse than this. So I decided then I might do medicine. So I actually found it quite difficult. I didn't get into medicine immediately. I had to go back, did a matriculation and went in. And that was a lot of study, and I did find it quite difficult because maths and those things weren't my natural go-to subjects. But I did really enjoy it. And then I went on and did general practice and did more study and married and had kids and do all that stuff that takes up a lot of life. And then eventually my husband said, just for God's sake, go and do a writing course. So I did.
And what prompted him to say that? Was something burning in you that you were talking about wanting to write? What sort of kind of prompted him to sort of say, look, go ahead and push on with it?
I think I must have said a lot. It's hard to know. When you're irritating somebody, you don't know what it is you're saying, but I suspect I did talk about writing and books and, oh, I wish I could do that, or something like that. So I must have said that more than I remember. But he did, he said he just pay for it, just join up and go. And that's what I did with a group called the Writers Studio in Sydney. And they were fabulous. It was a 4-week course and I just absolutely loved it. And then just kept signing up for courses. I became a bit of an addict then. I tend to do that with things, just go full on the other way.
Did you, during your medicine, did you do papers or research papers or anything like that? Was that sort of part of the writing or not?
Yeah. Not really. I did do one research project where actually, I'm sure you see a few of these, Harry, in your work, where I stayed on the orthopedic ward, like almost 24/7. It was 2 of us actually, so we took turns at sleeping there. And we interviewed every person to come to the orthopedic ward and how many alcohol-related admissions, how many orthopedic admissions, were directly or indirectly related to alcohol. And it was something like 68%. Elderly women who tripped down the stairs because they'd been drinking, their sherry and stuff at night. And people with a result of domestic violence or people who just drunk too much and had motor vehicle. It was extraordinary. So that was published somewhere, and I couldn't even tell you where now, but it was very interesting. And the fellow who supervised it, I think his name was on the paper. We were just the lackeys collecting the data and writing our, something so that we could, I think it was for part of our postgraduate studies. I didn't do a lot of that, no.
Yeah. I mean, I'm always amazed at how so much medical research is relied on very small numbers of the data sets tend to be really small. For having a scientific background, you just look at it and go,
yes,
how can you use that? That's not statistically relevant. And
yes, definitely,
but
they're getting better now. They've got those certainly cardio. If they're sponsored by a drug company or things, they have huge amounts of money and they can do a lot of stuff. And there's like that recent menopause one that Sue Davies did that was released. That was really good. So we're getting better.
They're getting better. Yes, they are getting better.
I think if you're wanting to approach some new drug, it's cool to have studies that say it's fantastic. No doubt about that. And it's expensive to do studies, so
it is.
And people are usually trying to get their postgraduate, their masters, and goodness knows what. And I had no ambition to do that in medicine, so I was quite happy. I spent a lot of being a rural GP, so a regional. Well, I'm not remote, but I did a bit of remote work, but mainly regional towns and things. Yeah. So
at what point did you start to pen your novel? So your novel, which has been published early this year, The Truth About My Daughter. When did you start to pen that story, and what inspired the ideas for that? We'll talk about the themes in more detail a bit later on, but what initially inspired you to start writing that story?
And I know I've been asked this a lot, and it's really actually hard to remember because this particular book is not the first book I'd written. So I wrote one book with the Writers Studio Sydney, which will probably never be up. I'm not unhappy with it, but there's themes in it that would require quite detailed sensitivity reason. I'm not sure I'll go back to it. So it wasn't my first book. And I think that the idea for this one was probably sitting dormant like forever. I think I just had little seeds of this one there. And I think I had to write other things to feel brave enough to write it. So I suspect it would have been maybe 2019 or 2020, and I did it in bits. Like I wrote it and then I went and wrote other things and then I came back to it. So it wasn't like a linear, or it was a very organic thing that I didn't feel quite brave enough or good enough to write initially. So I have got other things, and the other books that I've written I'll probably go back to and try and polish them as well. So it's hard to put an exact date on because it's just been spending your imagination so long. Think, when did I actually put the first word on the page? It's hard to pin a date to it.
It's interesting that you made that comment about I didn't feel good enough, or whether we're talking about imposter syndrome. Harry and I have spoken about this a lot in other podcasts, and you're not alone. I think we can all relate to that journey of the very first time we actually start transferring ideas onto the actual written page. And then we read what we write, and then we either think, we're the next literary genius, or we think we're an absolute dud, and we don't have the courage to keep going with it. But it's a real issue, isn't it, for all writers? I think, particularly when we first start.
Yeah, totally. I think the problem is I think we do compare our early writing efforts, like our first drafts, or just when we started writing, with published books, and Margaret Atwood and Tim Winton. You think, oh my God. I'm just crap, because it is crap compared to that. So it is very we're really tough on ourselves, aren't we? And I think
the problem is, though, that we're you're comparing first drafts with very polished professional writers who have had numerous levels of editing to get to the point that you're reading as a published book. And so we're never going to, our first draft is never going to be that great, comparatively.
No, totally. That's so true. And it's hard, isn't it, to know? I find it's hard to know when it is good enough. Like I write it, then I rewrite it and get it edited. And I know, do you have that problem? I think people they say, make sure you don't send it out until it's really, really good. I think, well, how do I know when it's really, really good?
Well, we've actually had we've had a few times the advice is that, or very sort of confusing advice is that publishers don't want it polished that much because they want to edit it. So, so it is this very confusing sort of state of, you get this advice that you should edit it and be the best it can be before you try and submit it to a publisher. But then the publishers are saying, no, we want to be able to edit it. So, I mean, it is confusing as to what level of editing you need to do.
Well, yeah, this is a bit of a confession. I don't know if I've said this on any public thing, but I think I have, but I've never sent any of I've got like 5 in various stages of drafts and novels there. And I've sent one years ago to a publisher. I've never sent anything out to public because I'm never sure when it's good enough. So I just, with this one here, it was actually quite lucky that it got published, because I just sit on these things and I think, oh, one day it'll be good. Now, one day when I've got more time and I'll really polish it, and one day I'll be a really good writer. And then so I haven't actually, I'm quite anxious about sending it out. I know it's normally, I mean, I've had plenty of things rejected. I send stuff to journals and things now.
Yeah.
But and yeah, things get rejected, or to competitions and that sort of thing. But I haven't with the novels. I don't know. I'm a bit precious about them. I just worry that they're not good enough. Yeah, very much. So maybe that's smart. Maybe I should take your advice, Harry. That's no one said that to me before. That they want my shitty first draft, not my 15th okay draft.
I'll just pick up on something you said a minute ago there, Joe, about mimicking, or not mimicking, but looking at other people's styles and comparing ourselves to the styles of published authors and the greats. And I've been influenced by certain authors when I was reading my early sort of crime fiction and the James Pattersons and more recently Australian crime writers, and looking at their style. But I think we're unfair on ourselves to compare ourselves to those people that, we might read something and say, I love that style, I want to be able to write just like that, but we never can. And I think ultimately we can learn from those people, but just go with your own style. I know for me, if I'm rereading and rereading my own words, I'm sick to death of reading my own stuff, and I think it's rubbish. But when other people read it, they go, "Oh, I love your writing style and how you worked your words and use metaphors and descriptions." But I'm so used to comparing myself to the literary greats. But I think I'm interested in both of your thoughts around comparing ourselves to others, but also trusting our own process and trusting our own writing. Can I ask you, Joe, first, and then Harry, your thoughts?
I thought, hoping you'd ask Harry first. Ladies,
I'll take it away if you want.
Yeah, you two start, Harry. Yeah,
okay.
I'm going to gather my thoughts.
Look, I don't know. I mean, it's weird. I mean, I do a lot of reading, and now I do a lot of listening to books. And as I've mentioned in previous podcasts, whenever I finish a book these days, I try and make notes about them, what I liked about it, what I didn't like, plots, and where things were good and where things were bad. And and I'll grade them in my own little sort of my own purposes, just as a learning process. But I don't know whether I'm canny enough to pick on people's style. I just know whether I like something or whether I don't like it. And they may sort of have a focus on one particular way they talk about a character or whatever, and how they develop a character. But I don't know whether I can pick up on someone's style. And plus the fact I don't tend to listen to this, or don't tend to read the same author over and over and over again. And so I don't know whether I can therefore say I pick up on a style. I think there's too many people to read to be able to spend too much time on one particular author. And so I don't know whether I try and mimic a style. I just write how I want to write, and and wait to see what the feedback is. I don't know whether I can actually say that I could even recognize somebody's style.
Wow. Yeah. That's how it should. Do you find listening to audiobooks is different to reading it in terms of when you're listening to the style of it is because I don't listen to audiobooks. I do like, there's something about holding a book. I'm not as good at listening to books. I listen to podcast things, but maybe not books. It's interesting. I've definitely got authors I like. Actually, one of the best things I did was there was a year where my eldest daughter said, I'm going to read 100 books this year. I thought, that's a lot of books. And I said, okay, I'll do the same thing. So I didn't read anything really fat. I tried to pick books that were not 500 words. I wouldn't have read, I just finished Tim Winton's Juice. That's a very muscular, big book. And I certainly, that style is not how I write and things at all. But I found that like I was reading genres I don't normally read, and she gave me things I might normally read, and that was actually really helpful, because then I just thought, hey, you do just have to, like you said, when I actually sit down and write, I think, there's people I really like Kristen Hanna I love. There's quite a few. Sandy Docker, I like. She's a women's fiction author. Joanna Nell, who's also a GP, she writes a lovely book, but quite a different style to me. And I think you're right. You just ultimately, when you start writing, and I think flash fiction and short things help with this. You get a prompt, you've got a weekend or something, you just write it and then it's there and that's you. That's how you appear on the page. And it changed. I find my writing, I look back at what I've written, I think, oh, I've changed, or maybe I've matured. Yeah. So
I think I mean, something that in the Jono books that I've written, my similes, I always try to make them Australianized similes. I try and add in a lot of Australianisms, and that's purely because I'm a Pom writing about an Australian character, and so I want to give them more of an Australian feel and flavor. I don't know whether that's done deliberately. However, whether I'll then in another book which has got nothing to do with Australia, then I won't be doing that, and so it won't be my style in that other book. So there's if somebody's reading my books, they may pick up on that as a style of mine, but then that's going to change. I don't know.
Do you ever put them into an English context? Do you? I mean, you must use but we all use the sum of our experiences, really. And do you use your? I can imagine you grew up, did you, in the UK? And so do you use that in your books? Is that
not
characters who are English or who've migrated, or?
I've got a couple of in my books. There's a couple of poems that are as bit characters and the like, but there's no main English characters. But then I've got ideas for books that are going to be based in the UK. So I've just got to find the time to get around to writing those ones, and then the sort of more my history of living in the UK can be tapped into. But currently, virtually all of my stories have been Australian.
Yeah. Oh, it's a tax deduction coming up, Harry.
Sounds like a good idea.
Joe, can we move into your path to publication? Any emerging writers listening to our podcast are probably interested in the authors that we speak to. We've all had different journeys. Incidentally, probably yours and my journey towards publication is probably very similar off the back of a competition. But do you want to tell us your story?
Well, as I think I mentioned before, I was never felt I could just send it to a publisher. I didn't quite feel I was polished enough, but I did send them to competitions. They were the Hawkeye Unpublished Manuscript Award is open each year, and I think closes in mid-December again this year. So I have sent several of my books in. Several of my books have actually placed in that competition. And the debut novel, the first one that was published, not the first one I've written, placed second in that Hawkeye comp in 2023, I think. 2022 it might have been. Yeah. So it was published as well. And then Carolyn Martinez, who runs Hawkeye Publishing, rang me when I was at work. And I remember thinking, I just want to go home now. I went out to the waiting room. I wanted to tell everyone, I've got a contract for a book. I didn't. I actually kept healing the sick. I did. Don't know how well I was concentrating after that. I hope I didn't miss anything. I don't think I did. But it was a good day. It was a good day. But that's how it happened, really. So it was really sending something. And it's good because you only have to write 30 pages. So you have to get these 30 pages, get them really good. And then I did get them edited. And then you have to write a page about how you would market the book. And I had no idea how I would market the book. So I don't know what I wrote in that, but I was actually asked last Sunday to do a presentation about connection, about networking. I thought, networking? Why are they asking me about networking? What do I know about networking? I know a lot about it now because I've done quite a bit of work on it in the last few weeks in this talk. But you do have to write that piece. And I can see now how important that is, because whether with a traditional publisher or self-published, you really have to be out there blogging your book all the time. It's quite, even people with, whatever publisher they're with, they really do need to put a lot of work into speaking and going to book events and saying, here I am, here's my book, please buy it. And actually it's quite hard. I find that much harder than writing the book. I'd much rather be writing another book than doing that, I think, but I'm leaning into it now. It's getting better and better. and people are buying the book, which is very nice. Yeah. So my publishing journey was it was, I suppose, when I say short, it wasn't that I sent, people who have 92 rejections and they become a Netflix star, nothing like that.
That kind of leads me into my next question. So we've talked in other podcasts about people's different paths to publication. Clearly there's can be some success, and we always encourage people to enter the manuscripts into competitions. And so as a result, you've done well in the Hawkeye Manuscript Development Prize. I was actually a judge that year, so I don't remember receiving payment
Impeccable
from
taste,
you, Joe,
Jack. Impeccable reading taste.
but my actual question was, given that you are still a practicing doctor, a GP, so you're still a practicing doctor. My question is more about how have things changed for you? Or it's a double whammy question. How have things changed for you since your book's been published, and how are you still juggling all that proactive marketing stuff that you are required to do? And you've been very proactive and putting yourself out there at different events and different marketing opportunities. How are you juggling that with your career as a doctor?
With difficulties. Great difficulties. So I don't work every day. So I do have time off, and I do some Saturdays, but not every Saturday. So, but I think something just has to go, and I've just decided the writing's a priority. My kids are a little bit older now, so our son cooks 3 nights a week. I'm not very big on housework. I'm not really big on cooking. Like, we do things like, like we have called breakfast for dinner, where we have, poached eggs and salmon on toast or muffins for dinner. So I don't put a lot of energy into those things. I don't have many clothes that need ironing. So I think I prioritize the things that are important, and I decided writing is more important than those things. So I probably should be a bit more meticulous with my tax. I probably could do that a bit earlier. But they're the things that have been pushed aside a little bit. So I try to focus very much on things that are writing, like going to my writers group, which I love. And I do get up early a few mornings and write. So, and that time is no one's up except the dog. And I just sit down and I do just write, because there's no distractions and things. So I'm quite disciplined with when I do write. I do a newsletter regularly, and I actually really enjoy that, because I include a lot of work related things in that. So I don't have to do a separate. I can use things I already know. It doesn't take a lot of work. And I do enter a lot of short story flash comps and things, because they're usually over a weekend, and I can just commit a few hours that weekend to it. And then I try to have a bit of it's sort of fallen apart a bit since this book's been published. I try to write, so I'm not going to write that many words a thing, but I have a bit of a general goal. It'd be nice to get the layout of a book done by then and things. So this year that has not happened, I'll be quite honest. I'm just doing what I can when I can, and I'm just thinking, well, so be it. I have to keep enjoying it. That's what's important. So yeah,
absolutely. Have you ever been tempted to put any marketing material in your surgery?
Oh, I'll tell you what I do. I have, yes. Yeah. My husband,
because that's a ready number of people coming through.
Yes, it is. And people, I'm amazed how many patients it came to my book launches. So I've got this little thing my husband made. On the back is a QR code. So I just hand it to people and say, you want to know about my book? You can buy it straight from the publisher. So I have that.
Yeah.
And I
excellent.
also have my daughter designed this. It's family helpful. It's a bookmark with my cover on it, and then at the back I've got my web page and the archive for my newsletters and things. So look, I just have them sitting there, and if it comes up, yeah, just like that. There you go. Yeah. Do you hand it to patients while they're lying on the stretcher and you're resuscitating them? Just slip it down their clothes.
No, I have drawn the line at advertising to patients. However, I'm very open to sell books to other paramedics, and yes. I do carry a bag of books with me in my ambulance.
You have to slide in their clothes, and so when they think, "Oh, what's this?"
Yeah, no,
this
I would get
into my life.
I would get into a lot of trouble if I did that.
Hey, Joe, following on from that.
Yeah, I do some. If the opportunity comes up, any opportunity, wherever I am, if I'm a sole trader, then like if you're a GP, you're not like employed there. You just work for yourself, so you're probably employed. I guess that's the difference.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And of course, I'm sure, Joe, you spend many hours each week running as well, given that you're a long distance marathon runner.
Yeah. That's part of my writing plan, though, because you can get I did the Indigenous Marathon Foundation Marathon on Saturday, so I got up very early and did that. And that is actually a great, if you can do something that takes you away from everybody and noise and distractions, and your head I've been running long enough now. I'm not going super fast or anything. I'm just running and thinking and plotting and planning, and not always. Sometimes I just run and just get rid of a bad week, But other times I've got a knotty thing in it. Like at the moment, I'm struggling with a new manuscript. I'll think that through while I'm running. It's really good for your mental health and for your, for everything. And now I'm getting a little bit older. Older ladies, we have this, our bones get a bit more fragile as well, osteopenia. So I feel that I need to do something like that so I don't go to seed. So that's partly my running does a bit of that as well.
So speaking of marathon running, how would you compare that process to writing a novel?
Much easier than writing a novel. Much easier. You can just let your legs just do their thing, find your happy pace and go. Whereas with writing, you do have to, sometimes it just doesn't come in that same easy way. So look, there's a lot of similarities. You do need to, whether you're a plotter or planner, at some point you do need to do a bit of planning, and you do need to plan. If you're doing you can get away with doing a 10K or something without planning too much, but hard to do that with a marathon. You do have to have a bit of a plan. And it covers everything. You sort of have to eat reasonably well. I mean, I drink wine and I eat chocolate and things, but it's you do have to be a little bit more if you've got an event coming up. And you get to that middle and it's just terrible. You think, I'm never doing this again. You get about 30K. You think, oh my God, I'm not doing this. And that's a bit like that bit in the middle of the novel where it's not going anywhere, nothing's happening, and you're meant to have stuff happening. So there are definite similarities. And then you get to the end and it's so euphoric. Writing the end or crossing a finishing line is amazing. So lots of similarities. It takes a certain amount of commitment, a certain amount of insanity, a certain amount of letting family and friends down because you're not going to go out with them because you're not going to drink wine and whatever. And so there are a lot of similarities. A
lot of discipline.
Definitely.
Discipline.
Now, discipline. That's the word.
If we delve into the themes of your book, so your new book is The Truth About My Daughter, is delving into themes such as dysfunctional families, fertility issues, palliative care, coercive control, which is, ties in with the whole domestic and family violence. One I wanted to talk to you about before we move on to those other themes, positive masculinity. It's something that Harry and I have spoken about with another guest around the term called toxic masculinity and the negative connotations that come from that. But you make reference to positive masculinity. Can you tell us what that means?
Look, I think I recently wrote a piece for a magazine called Mind Food, and it was in relation to the really high levels of intimate partner violence, things, coercive control and things. And I think I know a lot of decent men. I'm assuming you're both decent men,
Try to be.
There's a lot of good men in the world. And I think one of the things I wrote in this sort of piece article that got published in Mind Food was that in order for these attitudes, we can have legislation is really important, and I'm totally support legislation. After Hannah Clark died, and I think Jess Hill wrote that fantastic book, and that has prompted legislation about coercive control. And I think Scotland actually is they're quite, I think they were the first country in the world to legislate. But legislation is just one part of the thing. We need to bring up our boys to make it shameful. So that if a bloke makes a sexist remark or a sexist joke or pulls out a pornographic photograph of his girlfriend, they need to make him feel bad so that he hangs his head in shame. And that needs to be the normal so that people don't do it. And I think changing those attitudes is the hardest thing. And I think that starts with our schools. It starts at home. It starts with how we teach our boys to behave around other men, around women, the sort of jokes they tell, the way they enjoy themselves. I think that's really important. So I have to say, in this novel, I didn't go out of my way to write about positive masculinity, but I've certainly I've been in quite a few relationships, but I got married quite late in life, and I have had some pretty bad experiences, but I've also had some really good experiences. And I think a lot of the men I work with are really good men, and a lot of the authors I read are very good men. And I wanted to have, certainly there's one main character who is a little toxic, but he's outweighed by the fact that the other main character, the male character, who's the love interest of Finn, my protagonist, is a very good man, and he's made mistakes, and he's divorced, and he regrets some of the things he did with his son that he wished he'd spent more time with things, but he recognises those things and grows through that, and he treats her really well, and is supportive for her when she goes through her losses and her griefs, and and recognises that her father perhaps isn't the best man. And even though his son, a lot of people don't like his son, but I do, and I think he's a person who's undergone difficulties and things, and he's trying to work through that, and has issues with addiction and things, but nonetheless is just a vulnerable human being. And I think I do think a lot of the issues we have with in our culture is that we are so brought up to think of men having to behave a certain way. And even, I shouldn't say it out loud because it is one of the schools here, the slogans that all boys' schools have and the attitudes that are encouraged there, particularly often the really elite private schools, are just really unhealthy and not healthy for men either. I think interesting, my husband actually works in this space. He is a mental health trained social worker, and has a lot of interest in working with men who are vulnerable and have mental health issues. And a lot of men do have mental health issues and are vulnerable and are anxious, but it's so unattractive for men coming forward to say, I'm really struggling and I'm anxious or I'm not coping, is somehow considered. And I think that's what we have to change, that it's just as okay for a bloke to come forward and say, oh, I'm really struggling and works really hard and my marriage isn't working and I feel like I'm a bad dad and things, and to be supported in that, not to think, oh my God, what sort of man are you? Which I think is still what happens now. That's certainly from the men I see, it takes them years to finally say, look, but you need help. Yeah.
Mm. It's interesting that you've found the balance in your characters, to touch on both aspects of toxic masculinity and to look at someone who can be a better role model. So that's really interesting that you've done that in your novel. Can we touch on some of those other broader themes? My question is, how did your experience as a doctor, and again, I suppose Harry and I can speak on this, myself being a police officer for 30 plus years, Harry being a paramedic, our life experiences and our professions feed into our stories. How did that feed into your writing? I'm sure you've seen and been exposed to a lot of these social issues, and how did you find it the creative writing as a kind of a creative outlet for some of the things that you were seeing and experiencing as a doctor?
Oh, I think absolutely. I think whatever we do, whatever work we do, I think that's going to inform anything creative that we do, including our writing and the way we behave, the way we do everything. So that's what we do. Work takes up a lot of most people's lives. So that does inform the rest of our lives, I think, and make us the people we are. So I think for me, I mean, I consider myself really lucky because I'm actually paid to listen to people tell me their stories. The problem is, it took me years to learn that. I was so worried about missing a diagnosis thing, so I'd interrupt them. They'd come in, and the minute they'd start about their shortness of breath or their pain or their whatever, I'd have this diagnostic sieve in my head, and I'd be so worried about missing things. I'd actually not listen to them properly. And I have started in the last, I don't know, I'm much better now, and I try to practice what I call narrative medicine. So I do give people longer consults, and I have gaps so that otherwise I'm running so horribly behind. And I think that is really, I've learned so much from that. And people, once you've been seeing them, I've been with this practice for a while now, you get to know their families, and you suddenly realize, oh my gosh, she's married to him. You'd never put these two people together. And then you realize this is their grandmother and this is the child. And so you get a whole web of, complex human beings and how they interact and the problems they have. And when somebody has a diagnosis like a cancer or something, you get to know the whole family. It's a really, I find it really fascinating how people respond to ill health and how they respond to being prompted to take measures to do preventative things so that we pick things up early enough. So I think I'm seeing people at their most vulnerable. Literally, I've seen people nude and telling me about all the stuff that's in here that they don't talk about to anyone else. I think that is going to make its way into your writing, And I'm sure both your jobs would be similar. I mean, you're seeing people when they're either doing the wrong thing or when they're, again, vulnerable, and it'd be the same with you, Harry. You're really seeing them vulnerable, totally dependent on you.
I think I was saying recently in another podcast how our both Jack and I's roles have assisted in our writing, in the fact that because we listen to people, it makes dialogue a lot easier to write, because you've listened and you understand how people talk, and that allows you to then put that onto the page. I guess that, this narrative medicine where you're listening spending a lot more time listening, you then get that sort of way people talk, and then allow, you can use that in your writing.
I mean, our dialogue could probably improve. I'm still working on the narrative medicine. I do need to learn how to shut up. That is probably my biggest. But yes, I totally agree. I think that's probably the most powerful thing you can do to somebody is to listen to them. We just have very few opportunities now to, and I think in the past we probably did, you probably had a local priest and you probably did things with, we're all so busy now. We've got our phones and our social media and things. So just having someone listen to is a really powerful thing. And I think people will pay to see a psychologist or to see us because I need to be listened to. I think we underestimate the importance of that. And I think often there was something happened last week. I'm just trying to think what she came in with. And I actually don't think I said much at all. And she said, oh, thank you. That was so helpful. And I think, what have I done? I think I gave a form for a blood test. And I do think it was just that, being
talking.
Listening.
I do find that though, that because obviously it costs to go to the GP and it's free to call an ambulance, I do find a lot of the time I'm standing there in somebody's house, they give me chapter and verse of their life. I'll sort of say, so what's the story? And then they'll give me this long-winded thing. And then you stand there and eventually when they finish, you look at them and go, so why am I here? And that's really common, unfortunately, because you're just like, I don't know why I'm here. Could you tell me why you called an ambulance today? I don't know. From your half-hour talk to me, I have no idea why we're here. Anyway.
No, that is true. I think people don't, and I think I read an interesting thing that people come in not with a diagnosis, but with symptoms and things. I don't know, and people don't know whether those symptoms are important. So people don't recognise that the chest pain is actually really important, whereas the little abscess on their hip is probably sore, but probably not as life-threatening as the. So I think there's that sense of perspective. Like we see everything through the lens of what's the thing that's most likely to kill this first? I've got to get that out of the way first, then I can focus on all those other things that they've come in with. So I think there's it can be hard, isn't it, to see the world from the point of view of someone who thinks that's really important and like a really serious illness that needs an ambulance, when in fact they probably could have come to see me.
Go see a GP.
They probably don't want to pay me. That's the problem.
Please go see a GP. People don't realise it's costing like $1,500 for the ambulance call out. But it's free, so they don't have. Anyway, that's a whole. That's another. We haven't got time to go into that.
Joe, can I ask you a question about your book in terms of what sort of genre category it fits into? There's the term of women's fiction or women's contemporary fiction. Clearly, there's women make up probably from. This is just anecdotal, my kind of views on being involved in the writing community when you go to writing events, and there seems to be a real leaning towards females are more into, I don't know, I could be wrong, but there certainly seems to be, there's a big reader base with women, and certainly there's a strong contingency of women in the writing and publishing industry. So this whole notion of women's fiction or women's contemporary fiction has a very big reader base. What's your take on that genre, if we want to call it that?
Well, what you're saying is very true. I actually was recently at the Northern Beaches Readers Festival in Sydney, and I sort of volunteered this. I helped set things up, and there were 2 men there. And I think through the rest of the weekend, I think I didn't run out of fingers counting how many men were there. So there's a real opportunity there, isn't there? I think our toxic masculinity might reduce if we get more men to read and more empathic. So a market option there for us. But I think women's fiction, I think it's a bit of I totally understand that we need to have genres in order to fit our books on the shelf in the libraries and at bookshops and things. So it's a convenient way to categorize things. But even in things like fantasy, there's so many subgenres now, aren't there, that, to make so that people can actually go to exactly what they want. And I think women's fiction, it's not an ideal category, because I think a few men have read my book and they've enjoyed it. So I think, but if it's called women's fiction, you're a bloke. You're not going to go, I'm going to read women's fiction. You want to be seen buying a book that's on the women's fiction shelf, I'm sure. So I can understand it's useful, and it does mean we deal with a lot of like social issues, and most women's fiction books will have And there's obviously has to be the normal character arcs and things, but they do deal with a lot of social issues. Most of them will deal with like topical current issues, contemporary women's fiction like homelessness and relationships and difficulty in relationships and death of a loved one or raising children and the complexities of doing that. So most women's fiction will delve into those sort of topics, but I think they're just as relevant for everyone. It's not like those issues impact women and don't impact men. I think it goes back to what we were talking about before. Yes. But I think reading fiction makes us more empathic, and women are more encouraged to be that way. And I think it's a sad thing that we're in a society where maybe men, you know, you have to apologise a bit if you like that. It's not like the way we're raising our boys still.
Okay,
it's difficult to say because at the end of the day, I mean, we've got two boys and we gave them so many books, and as kids there were we read them, and there was books and books and books and books, and unfortunately their attention gets grabbed by shiny things and flashy things in games and the like, and books are just too hard. They take longer time to sit there and read, and so I don't know. Yes, you can try your best to promote books with your kids, but unfortunately, there's so many distractions that hopefully they'll grow into them. We'll see.
That's it. I think because they've got that base, I think what you grow up with, I think the stuff, that's why having a semi-decent childhood, I think, is so important, because all that subconscious stuff. So if you have people reading to you and things when you were a kid, I mean, there are kids. I have this lovely woman who she's a special ed teacher, and she said there's kids who start in prep and they've never seen a book because all they get is junk mail. So they don't read newspapers, they don't read magazines, so they don't actually know how to turn the pages of the book. So there's this whole process in reading a book. You have to know how to turn the pages, you have to recognise those funny little things are actually words, and that they make sense when you can learn to read them. So that whole process has happened to your boys by the time they get to school. There'll be other kids where they don't have that. So your boys at some point in life, when they're less preoccupied with shiny things, they'll probably come back to that and think, I remember when and they'll find a book that they really loved. And if they have kids, I remember Dad reading that to me. I'm going to read. There's a book that my husband, was one of the Dr. Seuss ones, he read to the kids, and they all still quite really enjoy it. So I think they come back to it. Yeah. But boys particularly, like our girls do read more than our son. That's very true. But I think that's a reflection of everything, what we were talking about before, that we've got a lot of work to do. We've got to change the gap. Legislation's great. Now we have to actually change the narrative for men so that men can be creative and talk about their feelings and all those things. Because I think it'll make better relationships. And I think they get more out of life too when, you feel like, you can say what you want and what you feel, and you can have a bad day without, kicking the dog and all those things.
And I've got two sons, one age 20 and one age 24, and my eldest daughter, she's 27. She's got her own child now, so my first granddaughter. But I'm just thinking boys versus girls. You both talked about distractions, and probably boys are more easily distracted and have less concentration spans than girls do. But even conversationally, my boys will come home and you're lucky if you can get one or two words out of them about how's your day been. Whereas my daughter, wow, she loves a chat. So I don't know. I actually saw somewhere where vocabulary, women use like 5 times more words than men do. Women are probably more comfortable. I don't know why, and maybe again it's another topic for another day. But I believe there is research out there that says that women vocalize a lot more than men do, and whether that's a good thing or a bad thing in terms of men bottling things up inside, and the taboo around expressing your feelings. There's a lot of issues that you've touched on there, Joe.
I think it's the classic one where you've got your partner talking, and the bloke is trying to fix things, and the response is, "I didn't want you to fix it. I just wanted to talk about it."
Yes,
you're like, huh?
I think that's a nurture thing. I don't think I don't think we're wired that way. I think there's expectations. This is what it's like to be a male, and I think women have. I think one of the advantages we've had is that in the past we were, in the 50s and things, the ideal woman was at home with the apron on, that sort of thing. But we have sort of breached that, and there are, and sure, there could be far more. There are women. We are seeing, a woman running for president in America. We have had a female prime minister, and even though there's a lot of work still to be done, women can look up and see that. But there's far less men doing jobs that would be very specifically, that be considered more female orientated, and so I think there's probably a lot more work to go to just make it acceptable to do whatever you want to do and be who you want to be. And if you want to be a dancer or a ballerina or things and you're a bloke, that's as fine as wanting to be a fireman or a paramedic.
Yeah. I do find it interesting that that nurses, I've asked nurses repeatedly this question when they refer to each other as sister. I said, so what do you say to the male nurses? And you get a blank look. If you're going to expand your gender stereotype, then perhaps you shouldn't use sister.
It's an interesting point you raised, Joe, about men not moving into areas that are traditionally sort of female roles. Again, I'm only saying this anecdotally, but I think there has been a push with, like, for example, policing. There's now, Queensland Police have got a policy of 50-50 recruiting. I think there's positives and negatives with that, in terms of pushing this agenda to have a gender balance. In terms, I think it should be based on, a merit-based selection, as opposed to one gender being biased against another gender because we've got to get so many numbers. But that's another issue. But what you're saying in terms of, we probably are seeing a push for, say, women to get into trades and other professions which were historically always the realm of the men. So we are seeing more women coming into those roles, but we're probably not seeing men coming into those roles. Things like primary school teaching. You're not finding many men as primary school teachers, hairdressing and other roles, administration, other roles that were traditionally, and I'm not saying it's right, but traditionally was seen as a female role. So I think I certainly agree that we are making progress, but we've certainly got a long way to go.
Yeah, definitely. And I think that would have a very big impact on the fact that that domestic violence and intimate partner violence and coercive control are predominantly, certainly I think 1 in 16 are men, but it is where the man is the victim. But 1 in 4 women are extraordinary figures, and we're still not doing enough about that. And I think one of the areas where we could really change that is the way we raise our boys. That is just so unacceptable that you'd no sooner do that than run nude down the main street in the city. It just has to be seen as absolutely something you don't do. And I don't think we've reached that yet. At the highest levels, there's, we still see a lot of sexism and things, and just in language, in casual language, and the way women are treated, and even women in senior roles, you're more likely to comment. Like when Julia Gillard was that misogyny speech I used to actually, one of my recent newsletters, they've put it to the song. So a woman actually, so it's really quite good. And I'm thinking, just that would imagine if that had been the other way around, if she had spoken like that about Tony Abbott, the way we would respond would be very different to the way I responded when
and she managed to pass more legislation than so many other prime ministers in the past, and it's just ignored.
It's very so interesting that there's still, even at this, it's much harder work as a female to not only to excel in those areas, but to be recognised as, to be more likely to comment on, she was wearing a jacket that didn't match, or her backside looked big in that. You don't really say they're not all good looking, the men in Parliament, and we don't really care, which is how it should be. I'm not going to make commentary on who's good looking in Parliament or isn't, but it really shouldn't matter.
Well, I'll quote Richard Evans. Richard Evans is an author. Harry and I both met up at the Whitsundays Writers Festival. He's a former Western Australian Member of Parliament, now a fiction author. And his quote is that politics is show business for ugly people. Well, on that note, we are getting to a point that we probably do need to wrap up. So just really quickly, I understand you've got another book in the works that we were just talking about earlier today. So just can you tell us quickly about, maybe no spoilers, you probably don't want to do that just yet, but what what writing projects do you have on the go at the moment, and what's in store for you for next year?
So I do have this book also placed in one of the earlier Hawkeye competitions, actually. It's called A World of Silence. And actually, it's been very much almost talked more about the themes in that book than the one that I've than the truth about my daughter. So they're basically, it's three women. It's who were friends at university. Two of them were friends earlier than that. And they all have secrets they keep. So we all know women are more likely, when they get together, they don't just talk about the football result last night. They actually talk about things and their relationships and things, but they still also keep secrets. They're things that they don't share with each other for various reasons, shame or not wanting to look a certain way and things. So the book does deal with the secrets that women do talk about and the secrets that they keep to themselves and the consequences of doing that. And it does have themes of coercive control, and there certainly is. There's some very nice men in the book, and there's some not so nice men as well. So I think I'm hoping I've got the balance right again this time. So that one's hopefully coming out. We're aiming for April next year. And I had written that book before the one that's actually been published now, but it has needed quite a lot of editing. So it's still going through that final bit of. I just finished the final edits very recently. And in fact, I was actually thinking about sending it to you because for some police sort of input, I imagine from your books that you've done a lot of work in the domestic violence sphere, but I did have one or two lines in there which are actually incorrect. And a woman who works that sphere just today, they sent me things through, the police wouldn't be able to tell you whether there was an AVO in place or not. So I have to actually change that line. So a phone call that was made, little things like that. And I have got a little booklet about, information sharing, but it's not all up in my head. So yeah, it's a bit of work to go with it, but it's getting there. Hopefully it'll be out next April.
Well, good luck with that. Congratulations on the publication of your first novel, and good luck with your subsequent novel and all your endeavours with your writing. And I know you're involved in a writers club, a writers group called Brisbane Scribes, which you invited me along. A lovely group of people. So you're actively involved in the writing community and with your running, and you've got so much going on. It's like the old saying, if you want something done, go to a busy person because they'll get it done. So sounds like you're juggling many balls in there at one time. So congratulations on what you've achieved, and good luck with your future endeavours.
And thank you for not mentioning the things I'm not juggling. I appreciate it.
Okay. Well, on that note, we might say goodbye for this episode. So thanks, Jo, for your time. It's been wonderful and very insightful to speak with you.
Thank you very much for coming.
Excellent. Thank you very much. It's been very good.
Okay. Thank you. Bye-bye.